This is ABC Radio Melbourne and Victoria with Jacinta Parsons.
Look, if I tell you that women over the age of 50 are the largest growing cohort of homelessness in this country, would you be surprised? Or maybe the question is, should you be surprised? Our next guest isn't as such. At 66 years of age, she's actually living that complex possible nightmare of not having anywhere stable to live, and also experiencing what happens when you speak to people about it, where there's an enormous amount of judgment and potential shame. So she's been brave to come out and tell her story of homelessness. You may have read her story in The Guardian this week, and I'm very, very pleased to have her join you this morning. Welcome, Lynette.
Good morning.
Yes, it's morning.
Yes.
We should mention we're actually pre-recording this because you are observing the Sabbath
Yes.
while this is on.
Yes.
Which is
on Saturday. Yeah.
Yes, we're future casting.
Yes.
Look, I'm very, very grateful that you've come in because your story is so many people's stories, and we understand that these stories emerge because of so many factors that our system kind of creates, lack of superannuation, if there's less opportunity for women to work because they've had caring roles for a long time. There's so many factors that contribute to this growing cohort of older women. How did you find yourself in this really challenging spot?
It was maybe 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and I could smell something awful surrounding my bed. It was, to my shock and horror, water covering my bedroom floor and the other rooms due to a severe flood event. It was October 27 in 2022. It was the third time this happened at my rental property, but it was the worst flooding this time, so I immediately left the next day. I'm covering this issue as it is close to my heart because I've been homeless for over 2 years. Little did I know that over 2 years later I would remain homeless, having tried every conceivable way to find a permanent home. Over the past 2 years, I've been touched by the kindness and support shown to me at all levels of society. My first move was very touching and encouraging as I moved and stayed with a complete stranger and her family. A kind and caring local counsellor heard my plight and contacted me directly and recommended that I contact this friend of theirs, and they were able to help. I stayed there for about 6 weeks. Then I was relieved to be offered an emergency apartment by Emergency Victoria to spend months in that situation. Then I had to leave there, and I have moved 8 times in just 2 years, as I was unable to stay permanently at any of the other places over that 2-year period. What I wanted to really add here is that, yes, I'm 66. I can't hide that secret now because everybody knows. But I'm also a casual relief teacher. I have a regular work with some terms with no work at all. I'm not able to work full-time. I am single, as indicated my age. I've also been on the Department of Housing Register of Interest for over 9 years. I have been on a pension for over 20. My belongings have been in storage for over 2 years, and if it were not for a close friend who was letting me stay in one of her rooms at this time, I'd be living in my car. And I mean that. Her words have been to me, "I will not have you living in your car." I cannot stay permanently in her house, so I need somewhere else to live. That's a short little brief summary.
And it's a hard thing to do, isn't it? Because the weight, the depth, the reality of that story is so much more. But it's wonderful. It's wonderful of you. There's a grace that you've given us to hear that story, because we need to understand that people like you who have worked, who live, who are doing what they are, who are in their situation, are falling through the cracks, and at 66 years of age do not have stable home life.
It's when I hear it from your voice, I go, wow, that is really bad. And if that was someone else, I'd feel really sorry for them.
Yeah, and I don't feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for this community that does not look after or understand the complexity of the lives that we have, that mean trying to pay rent at the rates that they are.
Yes.
And the other thing for you is that where you work and where you teach, it's almost impossible for you to find rental that's affordable.
No, well, I've actually had 2 different organisations, so no, 3 now, big organisations. Because I'm a little stressed, I can't remember the first one, but we're talking about the Salvation Army, Uniting Harrisons, and recently Anchor. They all had case managers sit with me, spend a long time, sometimes weeks and up to 6 weeks, trying to go online to find, with my income, a place to rent, suggesting lots of things. There was nothing. In the end, they took me off the other 2 books and said, sorry, we can't help you. And only Anchor recently came, I contacted them, they're in Lilydale. They still did the same process, same result, but they said, we're not going to give up on you. We will stick with you. And they then encouraged me to contact the Guardian newspaper. The article was written, and then they encouraged me to contact ABC Radio. That's what we need, action from every level. I mentioned a counsellor, people in the community. But this is so big and so bad and systemic that we need the government to work together to bring real solutions. Not telling me in 5 years we're going to build so many houses. Well, how many of those houses are going to be for social housing? No numbers are ever given. We need figures that say there's 5% or something.
Lynette joins you today, and as I say graciously, very bravely, sharing her story for the hope that there will be a deeper understanding and then some action taken for, as I said, a growing cohort of older women who are finding themselves homeless. You're 66, Lynette, which I think is, it's very exciting. Did you ever imagine, even 10 years ago, that you would find yourself in a situation like this? Is this so far from what you imagined for yourself?
Never in my wildest dreams. Never. I mean, I taught full-time for a decade or so. I never had a problem, even as a student teacher. I didn't have much money then. I could always find a place to rent. This is another world. This is not the world that I have experienced for most of my life. I wanted to add something that I think is positive and powerful. I recently contacted David Hodgett, State Member of Parliament, for help. Told them my story, and you wouldn't believe it. That was 2 weeks ago. The only option I have at the moment is that the friend I'm staying with has a big block, and we want to put a affordable house on that. The government provides units that they can put on properties if someone will do that for you, but it has a covenant, and the covenant is expensive to remove, and it may not be successful when we apply. So I contact David Hodgett and asked his department could they help. Immediately they responded. He is now, this next week or two, going to go before Parliament, stand there and act on my behalf. He's going to tell them my personal story, and his request will be, can the State Minister of Planning remove that covenant so that I can have a place to live.
And more solutions that need to be now, as you say,
exactly it.
Lynette.
Exactly
and 5 years from now, or the enormous amount of time, as you've described, waiting on waiting lists to maybe even get a look in at some housing that is affordable for you. Again, hearing your story, it brings it into that real understanding of how this can happen to so many of us, to any of us. But it's interesting, you were mentioning to me off air, you might say to somebody, it might come up in conversation that you're homeless.
Yes.
And you said it's really various as to how people react to you.
It's actually a conversation killer to start with. As soon as I don't say it a lot because it's not something I want to tell everybody, but when I do say it, there is silence and shock with some people. I had someone literally yesterday say, I can't believe it, but you're such a nice person. Or they'll actually do the opposite and say, well, why don't you work harder? Why don't you fix this? That's really hard because I've come here today because I want you to know about the other more than 60,000 people in Victoria that are on those lists, but because those lists are only for people who put their names on them. The numbers are vastly bigger. They're in people's homes. They're in little rooms. They're on couches right now.
Yeah. And it's very much, as you say, that silent epidemic because, especially for women of that age group who are doing it not as visibly as perhaps our idea of what homelessness is on our streets, where we see, you know, and I'm putting inverted commas here with great respect, you know, a certain type of person that we attribute homelessness to.
Can I add something to this conversation that I think might blow a lot of people away? Because I'm a teacher, I researched a little bit yesterday about this topic. I was quite surprised to hear this statistic. The Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing report, 11th of March 2025, shows Australia-wide 53% of women and surprisingly 47% of men have sought homelessness services. You're not hearing about the men because the men are even more silent than the women about being homeless.
Yeah.
And the other figure that I wanted to put out there was Victoria, and I'm sorry to say, has the greatest number of clients, double or more than in any state or territory. I don't know why, but it's a huge problem in this state.
Yeah. It's a huge problem, and it's not easy for you to come out and tell the story of your own life. It's not something that you wanted to do, but you felt a compulsion to do it because we need to be listening and we need to work out if we need to find solutions.
That was what I was wanting to say today. My thought coming here today was I'm not coming here for the attention. I just want action for all the people. And the whole country is suffering with a housing shortage, let alone the most vulnerable. So I just had a couple of things I wanted to say on the short term for this particular issue. I said it before, but the state and federal government need to be specific and set targets on exactly how much of the new housing is going to be for social housing. Don't just say there'll be some. That's short term. Another short term one is that there are people out there that need your help, and I want to. That long term. I'll go to the long term solution. Is putting everything on the table. We need a government initiated working group to look at this huge housing problem generally and specifically for the needy and vulnerable. And it needs to happen now, not in 6 or 12 months. They need to have every option on the table, even look at overseas what works, and not give up till we've got some solutions.
Lynette, using your experience in your life and your story, we're very grateful that you've shared it with us today, because it is so important that we talk about this stuff and that we reduce the shame, but that we take action, and that this is I guess the shame really is for the communities that we're in that should be doing something more about this.
Well, I'd just like to finish by thanking you particularly for being the one. When it's one person like David Hodgett, when it's one person like that woman that took me in, when it's one person like you from ABC Radio that says, I'm going to do something about this, and if the government will do that too, we can't help but have some success.
Lynette, you're a good gal. It's lovely to see you, and I thank you very much for joining us on ABC Radio today.
Thank you.